Hi, hello, and welcome to Under Review. I'm your host and one-woman show, Haylie Stum, and I'm super excited to be on your screen today, especially for the first time on this kind of platform. If you didn't know already, this show will consist of me giving my take on the crazy world we call sports today, and I'll be bringing some really cool people on to help me do it. Today, that person is the executive editor of national content at MLB.com and boss woman Alyson Footer. I'm really stoked for it, but more into that later. I do want to get into what seems like the most dramatic and Oscar-worthy performances going on right now, which is the NFL playoffs. What a time to be alive as a Bengals fan, am I right? As you've seen from the little title card there, I am in fact a Joe Burrow fan, as is just about everyone in America right now, and deservedly so. I mean, during the wild card round, the broadcast included a little stat that no one has ever sent a text saying the Bengals have won a playoff game, if that kind of puts the Cincinnati hype into perspective for you, but I mean, the hype is not underdeserved under any circumstances. The Burrow-Chase connection has been unmatched, 1,654 passing yards, outmatching every QB receiver duo 25 or younger, entering a conference championship, and that includes 2018's Patrick Mahomes-Tyreek Hill connection. Cincinnati is not just a one-trick pony, however. Receiver T. Higgins absolutely owned the Chiefs' defense up the middle and picked up 108 yards on 6 catches in that game along the way. The Bengals have shown that you can double team Chase. You can make sure he doesn't work his way into the backfield for Burrow to find later, and they're still going to make those big plays or work the center of the field with that T. Higgins, 6'4", 215-pound guy, and he often goes unnoticed when credit for moving the chains is due. I mean, especially with a running back like Joe Mixon in your back pocket for Burrow, it just seems like, although we've seen the Bengals get off to some rocky starts in some of these postseason games, don't get me wrong, that they're never going to be out of the question. Actually, it seems more like you should fear the Bengals more when they're down for the count, which in theory and like on paper is kind of weird to process. And that also includes the Cincinnati defense. In the second half of the Chiefs matchup, the Bengals played heavy coverage despite trailing a huge defensive risk. In the first 2 quarters, since he dropped 8 or more players into coverage on 24% of pass plays. In that second half and overtime, that figure nearly doubled to 45%. That stat was per Next Gen Stats. And it paid off. Mahomes went 7 of 13 passing for 59 yards, an interception, and 2 sacks versus 8+ men in coverage, which you don't see often out of Mahomes. If I was Matthew Stafford seeing that kind of stat from that kind of defensive risk, I'd be a little on edge, not going to lie, especially with kind of a big question mark on the rushing game for the Los Angeles Rams, consisting of that Cam Akers-Sony Michael duo. Okay, now under no circumstances am I discrediting the run the Rams have had in this 22 postseason. I'm actually doing quite the opposite, especially after ending Tom Brady's last run for a Super Bowl title. I mean, iconic. Stafford has really been able to continue building that emerging Rams power name in the NFL, and made that statement in their 2017 win over the San Francisco 49ers and Jimmy G, with his final line being 31 of 45 passing yards, 337 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I think Cooper Kupp is really the glue of the Rams offense, in my opinion. He's just provided that consistency all year that has continued into the postseason when they've needed it the most in all of their storybook games, if you will. He's averaging 15.4 yards per catch in the postseason, which is 2 yards more than his already notable regular season performance, which was 13.4 yards. And he has just that it factor every offensive coordinator looks for in a sense of meshing well with the QB style of play to be productive. And the crazy part of it is this is their first season playing together, which helps them match the 2007 duo of Tom Brady and Randy Moss as the only QB receiver connections to hook up for 20+ touchdowns in their first season playing together, if that kind of puts into perspective how well that works. The more questionable on the topic of chemistry this season, however, has been the addition of receiver Odell Beckham Jr. There's been a lot of debate about it, but that debate has then been silenced by his postseason performance for Los Angeles so far, I have to say. I mean, seen as more of a guy in the shadows in regular season play or a tag-along, I think he's really hit his stride in this home stretch, owning that wide receiver 2, and his performance might take coverage attention off Kupp to spread it out and create some lanes for Stafford. On the defensive side, very huge deal for the Rams. I really like how Raheem Morris has used his talent effectively so far. Obviously, you've got Aaron Donald that'll pose a threat to Burrow, and it could create an effect similar to the Titans divisional game where Burrow was sacked 9 times, and then you've got a linebacker like Von Miller that leads as a very effective and notable pass rusher on that D. I would like to see a cleaner secondary out of the Rams in this Super Bowl game, but they have talent that can bust through at any moment nonetheless, especially in a big game like this. Looking ahead to the Super Bowl showdown of two teams with absolute storybook seasons like the Bengals and the Rams, I've really been struggling with picking a victor because of how similar these teams have had it in this postseason. I just feel like it's scripted. It's hard to overlook the obvious momentum behind the Bengals, but it's even harder to overlook their issues on their offensive line, especially going up against Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey in the secondary, and just an overall strong Rams defense beyond that. It just seems like Burrow will have another hurdle to jump late in the game going against Stafford. Stafford, a quarterback, then can make it happen all 4 quarters. Having said all that, I think I'm going to take the Bengals in this one just because I feel they're able to completely buy into those big risks Zach Taylor wants to take late in that game. Something they have already done successfully, and they'll capitalize on them. As the football world has been turned on its head this year, the baseball industry has also seen some major changes. Changes that have been spearheaded by women. More recently, Rachel Balkovec became the first female manager in affiliated baseball under the Yankees organization, and Sarah Goodrum was named the Houston Astros Director of Player Development, becoming one of the highest-ranking female executives in the sport. Alyson Footer gives her thoughts on the recent women trailblazing on the diamond.
We're here on Under Review. I'm accompanied by none other than the executive editor of national content and just all-around awesome woman, Alyson Footer. I just want to say, Alyson, I'm so excited to finally be sitting down with you and be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is just women in sports.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate the conversation. I'm always excited to talk about the topic, and it's been a great year for women in sports and women in baseball, and it's been awesome. Things are moving very quickly.
And before we start talking about these great women that have trailblazed in baseball, I want to talk about the woman that you are. So just tell me a little bit about yourself and how you kind of got to this point in your life.
Well, I've been working for MLB.com for the most part, the better part of the past 20 years. I also have worked for the Houston Astros in 2 different jobs. The first one was my first job in baseball, which was I was in the media relations department. And in the second job, I came back and was their social media director. And I did that for a few years. But so that was about 7 years total of 20, going on 25, I think, in Major League Baseball. So for the most part, I've been at MLB.com. I was a beat writer. I covered the Astros. And now I moved into a role more national level, and now I'm an editor. So before that, I worked for a minor league team for 1 year. And before that, I was in college.
I did want to talk about this kind of trend of women coming into executive roles in baseball, like very recently, January and December. What do you think has kind of made this trend take off, and like what initiated that now?
Well, I don't know if it's, there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, Kim Ng being hired by the Miami Marlins was the big one. And that was just probably something that I wasn't sure was ever going to happen, maybe in my lifetime or career. But it worked perfectly. And if you kind of look back at the history of the fact that she was, qualified to be a general manager 30 years ago,
right.
She doesn't hold any, ill will toward people who would give her a chance. But it was like the perfect storm, right? So Derek Jeter, she was the assistant GM for the Yankees. I mean, she helped negotiate some of his contracts. She's a superstar in our industry. And Derek Jeter always knew when he was working with her, when he was a player, that if he ever had a chance, he always had his eyes on owning a major league team someday. And I think that, I don't want to speak for Derek, but I think that he always had in his mind that like he wanted her to be his GM, not because it would be some kind of token appointment, but because he was saw how completely qualified she is to run a baseball team. Right. And so that's what happened. And I think it's really cool. I mean, there's a lot of women, and I think that the fact that the game has moved into people, decision makers that didn't necessarily play baseball. So that's been going on for a really long time. And with analytics and just all the science behind pitching and hitting. So there have been a lot of people that have infiltrated these front offices and coaching staffs who have no experience playing baseball. And so now you have women who are also gaining all of this knowledge and education and studying and wanting to be scouts and wanting to be analysts, and they're moving into these roles. And they're very qualified because they're bringing the same thing that everyone else is bringing. No, none of them have played baseball. So it's really cool. And we see, the Astros just hired a woman, Sarah Goodrum. Might be saying her name wrong. Sarah Goodrum.
You got that right.
Yeah, to run their farm system. I mean, she's like the farm director, which is big. And you're seeing this all over. And like Brian Cashman said recently, when he hired a woman to coach, to manage one of his minor league teams, Brian Cashman being the GM of the Yankees, he said, I'm really looking forward to the day when this is not news anymore. Because qualified people that are being hired, and it's awesome.
Right. And that kind of leads me into my next question, especially it's kind of coming up again with Rachel Balkovec. There's still that debate of they didn't have that experience playing professional baseball, so they don't have that element of coaching. What would you just say to those people to kind of combat that argument?
That she is as qualified or more than anyone. Look, Brian Cashman is not going to put her in that role if he doesn't think that she's going to be successful. And she was a minor league hitting coach before this for the Yankees. And so she's worked with a lot of players. And the fact of the matter is that, like, I don't want to blanket all professional players into one little bucket. But if you can help them become a better hitter or a better pitcher, and you can help them get to the major leagues, they're not going to really care where that information is coming from. So she has master's degrees in like the physiology side of baseball. She studies eye movement, like eye tracking, like all this stuff, right? Exactly, like that. I don't even understand. I mean, I did a story on her several years ago, and she explained this to me, and it's a little bit hard to comprehend, but she's able to coach ball players based on this knowledge that she has. And she just knows the game. I mean, she's an athlete, she's a former college softball player, but she has studied this and gets it. And then is really well-versed on all of the, analytics side. So she was the perfect, fit. And clearly she had success in the coaching role before she got this one. And now I can't wait to see what she does with these players. It's funny because Class A, like her measure of success will not so much be wins and losses. It'll be, how quickly those top prospects that she's getting move through the system. So it'll be an interesting thing to keep an eye on.
So having said all that, what do you think the next step for women in baseball is? Is it just normalizing that women, should be holding those positions, or is there kind of like another step to kind of get that equality?
I think you'll just see more women being hired. Right. There's an interesting philosophy. I was talking to somebody who pointed out that today's modern day major league ball player, the hitters, certainly pitchers too, but more hitters are learning what they're learning now about like the science of hitting and all the minutia and all, like I was saying, like the eye tracking and all of that side of it. They're in the midst of it, and they're studying that as they're going through it. And so there's a feeling that in 10 years, women might get pulled back a little bit, because there's going to be tons of men, former players, that are going to come out of their careers having all of this knowledge that right now the ball players may not necessarily have, that these people that never played do have. So it's going to be a little bit more evened out probably in another decade. But, sometimes maybe it's just like, just takes one to just the first one, and then people fall in line. And if you have an open-minded leadership, and that's where it comes from the top. And if you have somebody who's really going to look for the most qualified person, regardless of gender, then I think that we've just now opened the door, and I think it's going to get a lot wider.
Well, speaking of that door getting wider, we kind of seen, a woman take a higher position in baseball across the world, but on the diamond with Genevieve Beacom, when she became the first woman to pitch the Australian Baseball League this month. As someone who does cover male baseball players on a day-to-day basis, what was it like to finally be able to cover a female baseball player on MLB.com? Because y'all did put out a story about her.
Yeah, that was cool. And kind of came out of, I didn't even know it was happening. I read the story. I was like, well, this is really great. There's like a feeling, I think it's important to understand that the reason that there's not a woman playing Major League Baseball is not because of like being shut out or chauvinism or, it's like 99.99% of all humans on this planet cannot play Major League Baseball.
Exactly.
And there are like physical differences between men and women, and that is completely
obviously
like, nothing wrong with saying that women cannot throw 100 miles an hour. I mean, it's just a fact. And it's, I covered a women's baseball tournament several years ago, like from women all over the world. And it is like amazing competition and the skills are off the charts. But so I always thought, well, if a woman does play Major League Baseball, it'd be like as a knuckleballer, because when you throw a knuckleball,
that grinky type,
hard. So a woman could be a knuckleballer, which I think it would be like so amazing. Of course, like there's only a few men that have become knuckleballers in Major League Baseball that have had success at it. Most of them also have very short careers, but it's possible. But this woman that you were referring to, it's just great. And I love that it's getting attention, and I love the reaction of her coach and like the people that were watching, and everyone is very behind it. And that's very cool.
I totally agree with what you said about a woman being a knuckleballer. I personally love to see a woman on Pitching Ninja like 3 times out of the week. That'd be great. But really love that. Do you have anything else that you want to say kind of about this shift in women filling those executive roles, or maybe just generalizing it, women being more involved in sports in general? Do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I just think that we're in a little bit of a renaissance, and I think it's really exciting. I love that I can talk to like a young person who's coming out of school or trying to get experience. And I met someone at a job fair, an online job fair, and she wanted to get into baseball broadcasting. And, 3 years ago, I would have thought, well, you don't have any chance at that, but good luck. But now it's like you have a real chance at this.
Right.
But that's what I think is so cool about young people now, young women coming out of college or even just entering college, that they can actually aspire to obtain jobs that they have a very good chance to actually obtain. And that it's not just somewhere you got to get lucky or maybe in 20 years it might happen for you, but it could happen right now. And I love it. I love that I came into this game 25 years ago. And watching how much it's changed and watching how on board everyone is with it. And I just think it's great.
I do want to hear your opinion on where do you think baseball is moving, and what direction do you think baseball is moving?
Well, I can't address anything that's like going on right now specifically.
Okay.
But we, the star level of players today is, there are more under 25 players than we've ever had before, like in the last 6, 7, 8 years. Obviously I work in the industry. I love watching baseball. I think it's really exciting. There's some things that have to be worked out. But in terms of like where the game is headed, I mean, it's always been around. It's always going to be around. And it's very addicting when you watch a game. And I think that, having covered like the Astros in the playoffs every year, like going to the World Series a lot of the time, coming really close to the World Series a lot. And it just gets in you, and then it just stays with you the rest of your life because it's always fun to watch.
Well, as a very big baseball fan, I was so excited to talk to you. I'm so glad that we were able to finally, converse, especially as a big Astros fan myself. But I really appreciate you talking to me, and this just fills my heart. So.
This This is Hoops with Haylie in under 3 minutes, and today we are talking about the Big 12 SEC Challenge, where the SEC took home the challenge title for the second year in a row, besting the Big 12 6-4. Let's talk about LSU versus TCU, where TCU got the 77-68 win. Mike Miles became a difference maker for TCU with a 19-point performance and got to the free throw line in the late game to keep LSU away from a comeback victory. TCU had led 50-34 with 15:59 to go, but LSU came charging back with a 20-5 run in the next 6.5 minutes to cut the lead to 1, however not being able to grab the lead. It was a good response win for the Horned Frogs after losing by 23 to Texas earlier that week, and also their second weekend in a row beating a ranked team. Oklahoma versus Auburn, 86-68 Auburn, no surprise there. Tigers continue to build momentum thanks to Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler combining for 44 points on 15 for 25 shooting. Iowa State picked up a 67-50 victory over Mizzou, even though Missouri started out hot in that first half, hitting their first 5 threes after coming into the game shooting 27.2% beyond the arc. But Iowa State turned it up in the second half, shooting 58.3% from the field and causing 18 turnovers for the game. The Cyclones ran away with the game after a 15-0 run to go ahead 49-34. West Virginia versus Arkansas resulted in a 77-68 Razorback win. The Razorbacks never trailed this game with help from Audice Toney dropping 19 points in the Razorbacks' 6th straight victory. A big upset of the event, Alabama defeated Baylor at home 87-78. The Crimson Tide shot a combined 59.2% from the field and went 22 for 26 from the free throw line. Alabama now holds wins over 3 Final Four teams from just last season with that win, having beat Gonzaga, Houston, and now Baylor. Kansas State versus Ole Miss resulted in a 67-56 Rebel win. Deshaun Rufflin scored 13 of his 17 points in the second half to push Ole Miss over Kansas State. The Rebels dominated in the paint all game long with a plus 10 rebound advantage and outscored the Wildcats 32-14 on the interior. Florida was able to add a tally to the win column by beating Oklahoma State 81-72. The Cowboys dominated in the paint, especially early in the game, outscoring Florida 20-8 in the paint in the first half. In combination with OSU's season-high first-half three-pointers, which were 7 for 10, the Cowboys were able to put up the most points Florida has allowed all season. Despite all that, it was no match for the Florida Gators in the long run. A huge game to come out of this challenge was the Kentucky Wildcats besting the Kansas Jayhawks 80-62. The Wildcats got out early and carried a 20-point lead into halftime. Oscar Tshiebwe for Kentucky put up a double-double with 17 points, 14 rebounds, and 4 steals, while Kentucky's Keon Brooks Jr. had the game high of 27 points. Their win over the 5th nationally ranked team proves Kentucky can make a deep tournament run as they got in the lane whenever they needed against the Jayhawks and cut down the number of turnovers against them. Mississippi State versus Texas Tech resulted in a humiliating loss, according to Bulldog head coach Ben Howland, as Tech won 76-50. This blowout loss put Bulldogs right outside that bubble of tournament berth contention, as Texas Tech shot a season-high 61.7% from the field and had 20 assists on its 29 made baskets, while the Bulldogs had a season-high 22 turnovers in their lowest scoring game of this season. And lastly, the Texas Longhorns squeaked by the Tennessee Volunteers 52-51. Rick Barnes' return to Texas was bittersweet, with a generous pregame welcome for the former Texas Longhorn coach that led the Texas Longhorns program for 17 seasons from 1998 to 2015, a stint that included a Final Four in 2003 and 402 wins, the most in school history. Timmy Allen hit one of 2 free throws to put the Longhorns ahead late, and then the Volunteers missed that game-winning shot on the opposite end. This was the first win for Texas over a ranked team this season. And done. Stop it. That was too hard. I hate to say it, but that's all I have for you today. If you want to see me go on rants again, if you've made it this far, make sure to click that subscribe button. And if you still want to hear what I have to say without having to stare at my face, you can check out the podcast version of this show and future shows on Spotify with the link that I'll include in this description. Follow the show on Twitter at @UnderReview with Hay so you can see updates and new posts right there on your feed. It's not a goodbye, it's a see you later, and hopefully you come back and see me in March. Bye, guys.